Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. Hello. Welcome back to Big Fat 5. A podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum and a proud member of the Drum Click Podcast Network. You can find out more about both of these at bigfatsnaredrum.com or thedrumclick.com, as well as all the socials, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so this week's guest is Richard Crave the Spaven. He's been one of the most requested names as of late, and it was quite the treat. Having played with Jose James, Flying Lotus, Gangstar, Cinematic Orchestra, James Zoo, and many more, his career as a sideman alone is enough to put him in the legend category, but it's his solo ventures that really showcase Richard's ability to be a drummer's drummer without being too drummy. These are, of course, all technical terms, but he respects both the craft and the audience at the same time. His ability to finagle through complex patterns while maintaining a conscious level of listenability is second to none. He's a proper English gentleman, and in this episode, he dissects the top 5 influences that made him into the drummer he is today. You can check out a playlist featuring all the songs either mentioned or played in this episode via the show notes. All right, cheers. So we had a Big Fat Snare Drum contest that ended about a week and a half ago, and we ended up picking one of your students. I didn't realize this. It was Patrick Galligan, and it was at PKG Drums Online on Instagram, and it just shows how much I inherently and subconsciously appreciate your influence on other people, because his style was so, the way he arranged that drum part was really interesting. And I'm sure you had at least a small percentage on helping him be that creative person. So it was really cool.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, he's been great to work with. Like, we do one-to-ones on my Patreon, and we just we can tap into that sort of psychological side of drumming really easily. You know, and so, I don't know if you have this with students, but you know, the students that you can kind of get into that side of it, you know, you're not just talking about the what, you know, the specifics of what you're actually playing. You can talk about the bigger picture, and they're kind of my favorite lessons. So it's been great with Patrick. He's also obsessed with drum and bass as well, which makes me feel like he's come to the right teacher.
Yeah.
But no, super receptive, and well done to him, you know, well deserved. You know, his life is probably will never be the same again. He can't walk down the street anymore. The photo ops is crazy, man, you know?
Well, you know what? He didn't get back to me right away. And he said it was because his Instagram was blowing up that day. So
it's all piling up, mate, yeah.
Patrick's changed. He's changed. So how do you, I mean, kind of to piggyback off that, how do you as a teacher, and this might be a very big question that people should maybe pay to hear the answer for on your Patreon, but how do you go about allowing a student to find their own voice? Because that's the hardest thing to do.
Well, it really depends on the student. You know, they sort of need to be ready for it, and it depends on the rapport that you have with that student as well. For me, it's like there's definitely trust. There's two-way trust when you're working with someone, because you're communicating about really personal stuff. And I find the students where I can establish that trust, and it will be students that I have respect for as people, I find that kind of allows us to get into all of that really interesting territory that makes lessons really interesting for me as well as them. You know what I mean? It's sort of like becomes more of a sort of joint discovery more than just a kind of, you know, some sort of generic drum lesson type effort, you know? So that's, yeah, I can, that's sort of when I get passionate about teaching, is when you get into the real sort of deep sort of psychological side and just, yeah, you know, bigger picture, music associated. You know, we're always talking about music, you know, aligned with playing drums. And I feel like they're the sort of students that, you know, I work really well with.
Yeah, sometimes being vulnerable on the instrument is more nerve-wracking than like a romantic relationship or those kind of things, because it's you're like, I think this is cool, I think this is rad, and yeah, it's tough. So to have that special relationship with someone that their job is to tell you if you're going in the right direction or not is key. So
yeah, and to be honest, I think if people come to you for lessons, you know, at this stage, like you're quite, you know, I think I'm quite a specialist kind of a drummer. Like if you come to me for lessons, it's because you're looking for a certain type of thing. And I feel like it's my duty to be completely honest. Sometimes that's not easy as a teacher, but it's really like what I would be looking for if I was going to someone, if I'd sought somebody out to have lessons from. It's like, please, I really want to know what you think. You know, it may not be sort of like technical, you know, I tend not to jump on people's techniques immediately. Gradually over time, when you get to know someone, I think that's when you can make adjustments. But yeah, it's definitely saying it how it is, you know. I think opinions need to be aired in lesson time. Yeah.
And you were mostly self-taught, right, at the beginning?
In the beginning, no. I had a teacher, which I think was really useful because that was at a time when I wasn't musically orientated. I was so young that I just kind of respected my teacher and I just did what he said. And when it was technical things, you know, I'd have hour-long lessons when I was 8 years old, and half an hour of that would just be technique, which I see a lot of teachers teaching kids these days who feel like they need to make the lesson more exciting, you know, whereas I was just kind of like, whatever my teacher says, Freddie Wells his name was, I'm just going to shout him out, bless him. Whatever my teacher said, I would just do, you know, just suck it up, basically, just get on with it. And then that, because he was a big band drummer, so that was my first sort of discipline. So I feel like I got the discipline out the way early on. And then when all the hip hop records and all the genres to follow came in, I was sort of like coming from a disciplined background where I could take that in any direction.
So we do have a few questions from some of our Instagram listeners. And
Nice.
The first one is, and I don't know what he means by this, so I hope that this doesn't fall flat, but this is Lucas Farron, and on Instagram he's at L Farron, and he said, ask him about driving a tour bus in Wisconsin.
Wow.
I have no idea.
This is some inside information. How does he know about this?
I don't. That's all the information I was given.
Lucas, I need to know how you know about this. And also, I had a disaster with some like Apple backup iPhoto nonsense where I lost the film of me driving this tour bus.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I was on tour in the States. The European tour bus drivers, they're all way too sensible and responsible to let any of the band drive the bus. That, luckily for me, that wasn't the case in the States, and I kind of let it be known to the driver that I'd like to have a go, you know. And then it was just, I think it was one kind of late morning, everyone was still in bed, and he just called me up the front.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I ended up driving the bus, basically. it was an interesting tour. Yeah, I'm not going into too many details, but how on earth does Lucas know this?
That maybe Lucas was the driver. Do you remember the guy's name?
It wasn't Lucas. This isn't Detective Lucas from the Wisconsin traffic department.
You know what? It actually is. I'm looking at his profile right now, and he actually is on the way to your house. All right, well, there you go.
Well, Apple destroyed the evidence on my behalf, so there's no evidence.
Oh, that's in some server somewhere, believe me.
Yeah.
So you're screwed. All right, so the next question is from Fernando Javier Cuadro, and he asks, and I'm quoting him, ask him how he did to get those dynamics. And so we've had a few people talk about or inquire about your ghost notes and your overall theory on your approach to building the blocks of your grooves with those.
It is a pertinent question. Thank you, Fernando, because it is actually important to me. It's something that I'm sort of constantly aware of, and it comes more from a kind of awareness, sort of like you're live producing yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like you're constantly, and I think this is actually a burden at times in my playing. It's like I'm so monitoring my output, in terms of dynamics and stuff like that, that it kind of becomes this sort of fifth element of coordination or something at times. It takes up quite a lot of CPU. But I think as well, because I know we're going to talk about electronic influences and stuff like that. That also made me really aware of it. Like if you're playing a dubstep pattern or like a drum and bass groove or something, I'm kind of thinking that the samplers and sequences where this has come from, the dynamics are very kind of measured and consistent. So I basically brought that into my playing. So I'll teach a track of mine called Side to Side, and I'll talk about ghost notes are one level and backbeats are another level, and just be aware of that and try not to play anything in between. And the reason that I feel that's important is when you listen back to it, a recording of that, then it just gives you like a real kind of programmed sort of aesthetic to your playing, which I just find translates really well onto records.
Mm-hmm. How did you go about working on that? Is there a specific thing you do more often than not that you feel has worked well for you?
No, not in terms of like an exercise, but I mean, I have worked on just all sorts of ghosting and, playing an accent directly after a ghost note and that type of thing. But like I say, the main thing is actually just sort of monitoring it all the time and just making it something to be aware of. Like a lot of players will, without thinking about it, the velocity on the hi-hat will just go up and down. And I always say there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that's the vibe, but it's just good to be aware and be deliberate about those things. And if that's what you want to do, then great. And if it's not, then you can just sort of lock off your, it's like another level of coordination. Just even out all your hi-hats and let that be the vibe, but you're choosing what it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're actually a great host, because what you just said about using the ghost notes in beats is instead of exercises is very pertinent to this groove that I'm going to play right now, which is a song from your past. There'll be two that I'm going to play, and then we'll move on to your choices. That turnaround right there.
What's the time signature? That's the question.
Right now it feels like 4/4, but
Not in 4/4, no.
What is that in?
It's in 6/4. There's something that happens with a lot of my music, which is people seem to think that it's more complicated than it is. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just like, snares on 2 and 4, dude. Like, that's it. Yeah. And they're like, no, but it's 21/8 there. And I'm like, no. It's just a backbeat. So in this, the snare just goes on the 2, the 4, and the 6 all the way through.
Well, now I want to play it one more time. Lesson in real time right there. How I wasn't listening to the turnaround of the guitar. I was just listening to the drums. Like, well, I mean, I can bob my head. It goes like this, so it must be 4/4.
Well, the kick displaces halfway through, so it gives the effect of something shifting in the time, but actually, you've got to just hold on to your 1, and actually, it's the snare never moves. That track is Vintage Year, right?
Vintage Year, yep.
Because basically, I wrote that tune with my guitarist Stuart McCallum, and we both liked it so much that we both put it on our respective records. So my version was called Vintage Year, and then his version was called North Star. So I recommend checking out North Star. It's got the same pattern in it. I think we did that second, and I feel like North Star is a kind of more refined, developed version of Vintage Year, but okay. So you might want to compare the two. So we completely cross-pollinated on that tune, and so we were like, why not?
Sure.
Who's gonna care? Why not? Let's do it.
I'm not gonna sue you. You're not gonna sue me. It's all good.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So number 2 is I'll just play it, and then we'll go from there.
What have we got?
Take a breath and leave.
There he is.
Watching my soul collide, and it's alright. We made it through.
Yeah, so that's The Self off, your record, The Self, and it's featuring, is it Jordan Rakai?
Rakai.
I never pronounce names right. I need to just go with my second assumption, and that should be the case. So yeah.
Can you just say my surname real quick, please?
Spaven?
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's make it. I've had my moments with Spaven and all sorts, Well,
so now
just making sure.
Yeah. I was. I think I heard it was like the 80/20 drummer was doing it. I did some research, and he has a phrase called "crave the spave." And so now I think for anyone listening, it's crave the spave, Richard, crave the spave, Spaven. So, but yeah, so that beat. The reason why I brought that up is because, and you alluded to this earlier, that you have a uncanny and insane ability to go in and out of complex patterns, but still have that listenability factor. And so what are some non-negotiables for you when you're creating a drum part in order to achieve that?
Well, it's a great choice, firstly, just from what we were talking about with Vintage Year, because again, this is just backbeat. This is in 4/4, and the backbeat's on the 2 and the 4. I sat down and tried to explain it to Mike Johnston one time. We were on a drum festival together, and it was great because he was hearing it like a 16th displaced, and I was literally writing it out on a napkin and was like, so you see the snare's just on the good old 2 and the 4, but there is, I guess, like I just want to make soulful music. I don't want to make over technical music that just kind of excludes people. I want people just to be able to like, oh man, I'm feeling this tune, I'm not in it to make technical, smoke and mirrors kind of thing. That's not my thing. That's not what music is about for me. So it does sort of come from, I don't know, influences, I suppose. Like the Self came about when I was deeply into dubstep, like labels like Deep Medi, artists like Mala and Hatcher, Vivek, Khan, bunch of artists. And I was just like, it just really sort of opened up this sort of stuff you can do, hi-hat patterns and all sort of around 140 BPM. That sort of became my favorite tempo. And then it's just like, how are you going to work that into your playing? And it sort of became part of what I do. And then putting that onto record and sort of presenting that was just a natural progression. And then it's just finding that balance, really, of like, I feel like with top kit, with hi-hat and with your high frequency top kit, you can get away with quite a bit as long as the groove is really rooted somewhere. And that's the thing with the Self. I know, some people hear it differently, but I think if you're not someone who's looking for the complications, then you just hear that backbeat on the 2 and 4 and you can just rock to it. It's just fine. And you can just get into the soulful side of it, For those of us that hear these things, maybe that's just a curse sometimes. It's like you just can't not hear these things. You kind of want to, if you dig under the surface a little bit, then there's quite a bit there for you in terms of like how you would go about playing this, even though you're sort of offering a 2 and 4 backbeat aesthetic as a result of all this hard work that you've done,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like undercurrents. That's kind of what's going on. It's choosing just tasteful grooves that have some sort of undercurrent level of complexity going on that you do to the extent of not overcomplicating things or taking too much attention away from the piece itself, or it's just important to me, all that stuff.
Do you, when you're writing drum parts, do you think clinically, limb by limb when you're crafting it in real time, or do you kind of rely on more of what you've referred to as the zone, just jamming out and then listening back and being like, okay, that groove from this section is more of where I want this to go? Or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, total combination, of everything, really. I just try and keep that really open, keep the approach open so that we don't get into some pre-formatted way of thinking, of approaching everything. Also, programming stuff, that's been a thing. Is like, program something in real quick and then like, let me just put this hi-hat pattern over the top, and then you kind of work on the rest of the tune a bit, and then you start to demo-itis kicks in and you start to really enjoy what's there. And then you're like, what if I try and play this on the kit? And then that transferring something onto a kit can be a real challenge, in terms of how am I going to play this physically? It's not, it's like nothing that I would ever play naturally. And as soon as I get that feeling, that makes me focus in on it. Like, I want this to be the most natural thing, because you feel like you're playing completely backwards, like your left side is leading or something, and it's like, man, this is just feels so unnatural. But I always just want to get those things and just bury them into my playing. And I think the Self is a good example of that.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of heights, but I am afraid of that feeling of when like your left hand's leading and like that uneasy where you're kind of floating. Very scary. All right, so the first one is a specific groove that completely changed the way you think about drums. And I'm stoked you chose this. So yeah, it's the Amen Brother Break by the Winstons. And that's G.C. Coleman on drums. And I'm going to start it at about 115, which is a few bars before the famous break.
gives me goosebumps. That like I play that to students sometimes, and just it's just this like it's a soul record, all right, big deal, and then it because it kind of comes out of nowhere, and if you don't know it's coming, and then there it is like that moment that has changed music so many times. Like it's such a I'm sure he's just like improvising that at the time. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's a great bit of drumming if you just take the Aim and Break just stand alone as part of the Aim and Brother track. Yeah. It's a great bit of drumming. But then what that inspired is just like, it's ridiculous. And it's still going, We've got to say, like, not getting the respect that he deserved from that is sad. To have just, this it's just like moment of genius, just beautiful, and it's a shame.
And so I believe he has since passed on, but did you ever get a chance to meet him?
No, I didn't know. No.
It would have been fun to have him on this podcast, because that was very, he was very ahead of his time. All right, so we can go on to number 2, and that is a performance which you either played or witnessed that altered your musical course. And you said Source Direct, Secret Liaisons. Is that the Amen Break?
That's the Amen Break, yep.
Well, see, there you go. I mean, like, it's, of course, it has the vibe, but I mean, the way that's chopped up is that's a whole nother beat.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that was kind of the sort of change in course for me. And this tune came at a time when it was kind of the first drum and bass club that I'd been to. And they used to play this record at the end every night. I think it was Fabio or Bookham, one of the DJs. He would put Secret Liaison on and then just put his coat on and like take the headphones off and just let the record just play out. That they would just end the night on that every time, and it was just like classic tune of the time, and for me, just because it had such an effect on me, it just sort of hasn't dated, that tune. And I remember that moment, and I still got a little goosebumps, right then, just hearing it. Or that might be from the COVID jab yesterday. I'm not quite sure.
yeah, it's probably a mixture of both, just like your songwriting. But
But yeah, it was just, and that sort of started off a real sort of passion for drum and bass, and like, I followed the scene, and I bought records and I went to clubs, and I was so into it. And I wasn't necessarily just going home and transcribing everything at that stage. I was just sort of young and just sort of being into the scene. And it's more like now when I look back on that and I'm looking at the way that I play, and I'm just like, man, that is just, it's just DNA to me, that stuff, So, yeah, that's why I chose that tune. It's just it was Mars Club in Charing Cross in London, and that was my first sort of experience of hearing that stuff on a system. Real small little crowd, little room. It was just like amazing,
How was it to be to be in London at the beginning of drum and bass? I mean, how exciting was that?
It was extremely exciting. It was really exhilarating because, well, for all sorts of reasons. Like, no one these days can understand that there was a time when nobody knew what drum and bass was. If I play like everyone's like, oh yeah, drum and bass, cool.
Yeah.
There was a time when there was no reference to that. We didn't know what it was. I remember first hearing drum and bass on a car commercial or something like that, and it's like, what? they're using our music on commercials now. What's going on?
Sure.
And at that time in London, it was just such a small scene. And when something is going off like that, when it's so underground, I think that's when musically it's really peaking, like when it's still sort of in its early stages and it's contained. And that's what it felt like. It was the Heads, the Heads crowd who just knew about this new thing. Really small scene, that was the seed. And I don't know if we knew that it was going to blow up like it did. I think when something is at that stage, you don't really care. You're just so into it. It's just so good that you just soak it up. It was amazing.
I'm curious with everything being so digital now and everything osmosising, because you can just exactly what's happening on the other part of the world all the time. If there's going to be as many of those little isolated small scenes anymore, not to be from the perspective of like curmudgeon, but I wonder if something like that would happen again, or if there's things happening like that in person at clubs.
I know. Yeah. I mean, take COVID out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
And there's, I don't know, but there's something to do with the fact that everything is available online, which means that things can be checked out in a precursory kind of way more easily. Whereas, if I had to buy records, I had to go to Camden and buy the record, and walk around with it, and just and go to the clubs and just, for me personally, that was a really important aspect to kind of live the scene.
Sure.
Rather than just check it out, You can't check out drum and bass on the internet.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think about that sometimes. Most of the progression of me as an artist, finding out who I am, what I want to say on the drums, are back before YouTube, when I had to wait for my mom to buy me the new insert whatever band record, and for 2 months it was just like I knew every drum part from track 1, 2, 3, 4, and now it's like it's a luxury, because I love the fact that if someone's listening to this podcast, they have the ability to go into all these songs we're talking about if they want to, which is great. I'm not saying that's bad, but yeah, it's superficial in a way. And
I think just from my experience is like, I'm sitting here talking, you're asking me about like what tune changed your course, and that's why it's important for me, because like to really like embed itself in your playing DNA, you need to commit to it in some way. And like watching something on YouTube is not a relationship, it's not a commitment, it's just look at all this other choice that I have, I'm distracted already, even just checking this out,
yeah, it's to make the conscious decision to stick with something, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so number 3, and it's your favorite drummer and how their overall body work has affected you. And in perfect, professional fashion, you actually chose a non-drummer, which is a good decision. And so you said you're picking a bass player.
Well, we were just talking about just scenes and obsessing about music and stuff, and there was just some albums from. So it's Michelle Ndegeocello who we're talking about, bass player. And like, I just really bought into her musical direction and the sort of production and the musicians she was playing with. And the reason I chose her as my favorite drummer, she's not a drummer, but she introduced me to so many of my favorite drummers. They just came through her band. Like she was just great at selecting drummers. Like the first time that I saw Chris Dave was with her band at the Jazz Cafe in London. It was around I think he's on the Comfort Woman album, which I recommend that album for some like early super tasteful Chris Dave. Amazing. And then there was the record after that. I can't remember the name of it. The one with Papillon.
Would it be the spirit music of Jemiah, Dance of the Infidel?
Yes. That's like heavily recommended. But her early records was there was Plantation Lullabies, which just really, really hit me, that record. Mm-hmm. It's kind of produced, the drums are sort of a mixture of production and live, I think. So you can't quite tell what's going on there all the time. I think it's Dave Gamson is the producer, I think. And then Peace Beyond Passion was her second album, and they both just soulful, just amazing bodies of work. Another drummer, I think originally Gene Lake was involved, I think, and Sean Rickman maybe, and then Chris Dave and Dean Tony Parks as well. So it's like for your favorite artist to then kind of be, just have such great drummers going through her band was just like, man, that's, I just followed her career and just kind of her music changed, and I just went with it. Like an artist you just really trust, even though they just, it's not like, oh, can't we have more of that same album? It's just like I like to get on board with an artist like that, and you're kind of in for the long haul. You don't know what you're going to get.
I love that an artist that you just trust.
Yeah.
So you did reference the Comfort Woman album, and I believe this is Chris Dave on this, and I'm just going to play Come Smoke My Herb, or as you might say, Herb.
Every time I play that to any student, the pen and paper is always out. Like, what's that? So it's like I need to get on that. Yeah.
God, I mean, the bass in that song too. I mean, the drums, of course, but yeah, she's amazing.
If you've got some time on your hands, just put some Michelle Ndegeocello records on, and just listen to what she's playing. It's like such engaged bass playing. It's just ridiculous. She's incredible. Yeah.
If you got the call to be the next one, would that be like this thing you're like, respectfully, I'm going to say no, because this is just respect it from afar kind of vibe?
I can't imagine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of beyond that stage of like, that would be the dream call. It would sort of like psych me out, and would be a bit too much now, I think.
Well, I have her on the phone. No. All right. So go check out her, guys. And then, number 4 would be a record that just hit you at the right time in your life and represents a big part of your artistry. And you said Burial, Untrue. The track is Archangel.
We might lose a few people here, because this is kind of post dubstep, programmed, scratchy, lo-fi, it's just so deep, this album. I love it. I absolutely love it.
All right. Well, sorry, guys.
I wonder how that sounds to anyone who's never heard any Burial before. But I tell you what I will say about that is like I've never had a problem in accepting electronic beats as just great, you know, or inspiring or whatever. There's no divide for me in terms of, oh yeah, but it's not a real guy or something like that. None of that. So to me, I hear that and it's just like, oh man, like just ideas, you know, just what a groove. It's just like, it's insane. I absolutely love it. So,
I mean, where were you? Because that came out in 2007.
Yeah.
Where were you in your career creatively that just hit you? Like, why do you think that hit you so well at that point in your career?
I don't know how attached career-wise it was. I was probably playing like a lot of broken beat stuff at the time, and a lot of hip hop, and also just kind of, you know, there's, you know, being from London and being through that whole drum and bass kind of experience that I was talking about, is you're still kind of just got one ear open for the underground kind of thing. So this dubstep kind of scene that's coming about, and, you know, just hearing fresh stuff, underground stuff, it was just sort of on that level that I received this as just like, oh man, it's kind of very soundtracky and moody, which I love that. I try and, you know, I'd love to make a soundtrack. I feel like my music kind of lends itself to that in a sense. You know, it's good. Put your headphones on and look out the plane window or the train or something, you know, you'll be okay with my records, I think. But yeah, Burial was just kind of, I don't know, just beats and sounds and just that lo-fi sort of grittiness, and there's just some sort of like he doesn't program drums like on the grid, which freaks me out. He sort of chops stuff in a really different kind of way, and that's just seems to just give him a totally different vibe, you know, which I just kind of just latched on to some of those ideas.
Yeah. Is he still producing music?
He is, yeah, he is.
Okay.
He was kind of like unidentified for a long time, which was interesting. He was just a shadow that wanted to make beats, you know, and now there was a big kind of who is Burial kind of thing, you know.
Oh, okay.
He's out in the open now. He's in plain sight.
Uh-oh. Yikes. All right, so the last one is the sound of a particular record that helped mold your tuning style. And you said David Axelrod, and it's the Song of Innocence, and specifically the song Holy Thursday?
Yeah.
All right. You know who the drummer is on this?
Earl Palmer.
Oh, of course. Oh, it's so good, that dynamic change.
Am I in the right place to just geek out and talk about bass drum sounds for a second?
Absolutely.
Am I? It's okay. It's
Please do.
It's safe zone for that, right?
Yeah. Wait just a second. Yeah, I think we're good.
So you're in the studio, right, and you're recording, and they're fiddling around with your bass drum, and then you know, and that subwoofer speaker thing comes out and stuff, and then you go in and you listen in the control room, and like every time you play the kick drum, like the air in the room just shifts backwards and forwards. Like so kick drums need to have all this sub frequency on them. That seems to be the kind of, you know, the thing these days. Mm-hmm. But like I feel like, because I play an 18-inch kick all the time, and it's kind of because like all the samples, this is Earl Palmer playing like before hip hop was invented, I think. In fact, what date is this album? 74, something like that?
68, actually.
68. Well, right. So hip hop's not invented, but he's just playing hip hop, and of course this has been sampled by, Madlib famously sampled this track, and so me being into hip hop and listening to those records is just sort of like, I'm into that sound, if you listen to the kick sound on that track, it's just a lovely expressive kick sound that isn't messing with the bass frequencies. It leaves a bit of headroom or lower bit of space in the lower register for the bass, and I love that separation. Instead of like sub bass and the kick all kind of, it's not so much the thing that I'm after for sound wise. And just so I'm trying to sort of sound like the samples sounded that got used in a lot of hip hop and stuff, and a lot of that will be higher pitched kicks because the samples came from an era when drummers played smaller, higher pitched bass drums. I think that's a good example, that Earl Palmer. It's just like, it just sounds like a hip hop sample,
Sure.
I just don't think we should be just accepting that without questioning it and being, what are we trying to get here? Like, let's not have that as our default.
Yeah.
Bugs me a bit, that one.
Well, Richard Spaven, we've had a good time. I know you just took your stuff out of the oven, so I wanted to make sure that I don't let you have cold food for dinner. But thank you so much for being on the show, man. This was awesome. We've had a lot of requests for you, by the way. So this is probably recently one of the most requested guests.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Do you want to do a quick, or not quick, you can go as long as you want, but is there any specific records that you were working on during COVID? Is there any live stuff that you do have planned out that you might want to talk about?
Well, no, I'm glad to say that I've got some live shows coming up, like with my band, because I've missed my band so much, over lockdown. So we've got a date at Jazz Cafe, 25th of June in London. Then I've got shows with Jose James coming up as well, which would be lovely to get back on the road with him. Been working on a lot of records over lockdown. I'm a bit of a workaholic, really. Hence the Patreon as well. I just couldn't, I was like, well, it's a project, let's jump on it, So there's like 44th Move record coming up. I did some stuff with Alpha Miss with his label, and I've got my own record coming as well. There's 2 new records scheduled, which I'm very excited about. All that stuff that we were talking about in terms of undercurrents, and kind of gone into some micro timing details that
awesome.
We might be able to spend another podcast dissecting those.
When it comes out, let's do it, man. I'd love to have you back on.
I'm quite excited about these because, again, I think they really have that thing of like, okay, cool, yeah, he's just playing hip hop, but then as drummers, we're like, but wait a minute, you know what I mean? It's just that,
I'll be right with you. I'm listening. Yeah,
yeah. That's just taking that sort of, the whole Ordilla thing and this sort of just micro timing thing, just, onto another level, and just kind of like, or just burying it in your playing again, it's just just getting these things entrenched.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it, and I will let you go. But again, this has been, it's been a huge privilege talking to you. So thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it, man. It's like I say, the questions have been really interesting, and it's been really good. Just really involved questions, and you've got me kind of thinking passionately about all the stuff that's been important to me. So appreciate that sort of an interview. Thank you.
And that's the show. Be sure to subscribe, and if you're listening on a platform that allows for ratings or reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, which means the show will get better and bigger, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'd be an OG listener that could brag to all your friends. Anyways, also, why don't you go ahead and check out bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all the socials. Just search for @BigFatSnareDrum and you will find it. This show is edited in part using Isotope RX8 audio editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. Bye.